Leading a startup team? Whether you're delivering a sugar rush, stocking coffee, or getting a regular delivery of snacks, Office Depot has solutions that fit every startup culture, from getting those first business cards and stationery to ordering fleece pullovers with your new logo. To learn how Office Depot and the California Technology Council have partnered to bring you savings on all of these startup essentials and more, go to californiatechnology.org/member benefits. I'm Daniel Levine, and this is the Bio Report. Last year, KemPharm was on its way to winning an FDA approval for its opioid Apadaz, designed to prevent users from snorting, injecting, or otherwise abusing. But the regulatory agency stymied the company's efforts when it declined to label it as an abuse-deterrent opioid. Apadaz is a prodrug that is converted to its active form through an enzyme present in the intestinal tract that releases the hydrocodone in it. The decision sent shares in KemPharm tumbling. Now, as the company works to resolve regulatory issues around Apadaz, it's moving forward with the rest of its prodrug pipeline. We spoke to KemPharm CEO Travis Mickle about abuse-deterrence, the ongoing discussions with the FDA, and the company's prodrug pipeline. Travis, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Danny.
We're going to talk about KemPharm, its platform for creating prodrugs that are abuse-deterrent, and the FDA issues you faced. Let's start with the problems of abuse of opioids and other drugs that have become a concern. How big a problem is this?
Well, it's a tremendous problem. I believe the CDC came out with new statistics that still put accidental overdose or intentional overdose of opioids as the number one way that people can die accidentally. So this is in advance of car crashes. It's become a tremendous issue, not just with deaths, but with addiction and the related abuse issues that can come from that.
From an FDA perspective, what does it mean to be abuse deterrent?
Well, the FDA actually issued a guidance to industry a few years back that outlined what they deem to be an abuse-deterrent product. And they outlined different types of technologies, and many of them are formulation-based technologies. But one of them that they highlighted was prodrugs. And there's a number of different technologies that can be used to make something abuse-deterrent. Fundamentally, abuse-deterrence means it's harder to abuse the product than the comparator product. So, a good example of that is OxyContin. The reformulated or new formulated abuse-deterrent form is harder to crush, snort, form for injection than just OxyContin that was on the market previously.
There have been abuse-deterrent opioids approved. This seems to have been difficult for the industry to do. Is it a technical or scientific problem? Is it a regulatory barrier, or are drug abusers just too clever? Why is it so difficult to make abuse-deterrent drugs?
Well, I think it's actually both. It's a scientific issue, it's a regulatory issue, and at the end of the day, abusers are more sophisticated due to the prevalence of the internet than they ever have been in the past. So scientifically, this is a nascent field. I mean, there's very little good, reliable science for regulators to rely on. It's a new space where people at the FDA may feel uncomfortable making tough decisions. And then on top of it, they also know that, once something goes out there, once the world gets a chance to look at it, it may not be as rigorous as it was in the laboratory. And so, everybody's really looking at this very cautiously, but it's such a much needed step. I just don't see that we can't move forward without having abuse-deterrent opioids.
Well, in June, an FDA advisory panel voted that Apadaz, a prodrug opioid you had developed, was bioequivalent to hydrocodone, but that it didn't meet its standards for being abuse resistant. What was the concern the FDA had?
I think the FDA focused on those measures that to date have been represented in the extended release products. So the 7 products that have been approved with abuse-deterrent language on their label all have things like drug liking, drug high that look dramatically different. A product like Apadaz, that's an immediate release product where it's also in combination with acetaminophen, can't really rely on those measures. They're too insensitive to look at what the differences would be. Fundamentally, we saw that Apadaz would never be more abusable than if you just swallowed the tablet whole. So you can't, inject it, you can't snort it. Those sort of things we thought were beneficial. The FDA just didn't have the regulatory tools or the scientific knowledge to make that determination.
Well, people who abuse these drugs do things such as crushing them, to snort them, or inject them, and there's a way to speed and intensify the effects. How does the Prodrug technology you're using work to prevent that?
It does it by a different technology than the formulations. The formulations essentially are a goo or a gel or some sort of hard tablet that make it difficult to crush and snort it and eventually get it in an abusable state. For a prodrug, the prodrug itself is inactive. It doesn't have any pharmacology. It doesn't create its own effect until it's broken down. And what we've done is been able to make it break down far more efficiently in the GI tract, where the drug should be delivered in the first place, as opposed to if somebody tried to snort the product or inject the product, where the breakdown is going to be far slower. It's not going to give them that sort of immediate reward that an abuser is looking for.
Was there data you presented that showed that in terms of its ineffectiveness to snort?
We did. We actually showed a couple results of 2 clinical trials. One of those was a study head-to-head with another combination product. That product was Norco, or it could be Vicodin or Lortab, any name brand replacement you want to put in there. Essentially, we showed that our drug comes on later. It looks very similar to if you swallowed the product. And ultimately, the comparator product, in this case Norco, came on very rapidly with a higher peak intensity than what we saw with Apadaz. But again, the measures that the FDA has been looking for really are based on the extended release products, and they didn't really have the ability to approve something with a more modest difference.
Well, you're now pursuing an ADH prodrug as an abuse-resistant version of dimethylphenidate. How does the need for an abuse-deterrent ADHD drug compare to abuse-deterrent opioids?
Well, I think there's certainly a much higher amount of abuse of the opioid products. Just the prevalence of the products out on the marketplace and the ability to get a hold of it either through legal or illegal channels is far easier. But stimulant abuse is a big issue as well, and has been historically, since stimulants were founded 100 plus years ago. I think abuse deterrence is great to have, and you really need to have it with any controlled substance. The nice thing about KP415 is it also brings patient benefits, which we don't really have in the case of KP201, which is our prodrug of hydrocodone.
What are the patient benefits it brings?
Well, we actually just completed a proof of concept study. It's an initial PK study, and we compared it to the product Concerta, which is the kind of the gold standard for care right now with methylphenidate treatments to treat ADHD. And what we showed was both an immediate and extended release profile due to the release of the prodrug or the active from the prodrug. In this case, we saw what could be better onset of action, which is great. I have 2 kids with ADHD, and I would love to have them have a little more medication in the early morning to get them out the door for school, as well as an extended duration that could indicate, again, a once-a-day, long-acting stimulant will keep them, again, focused throughout the course of the day into the later night where you actually start to get homework done and then wear off right before bedtime.
So are you taking the same approach with Apadaz, is this the same enzyme that releases the drug and converts it to its effective formulation?
No, each one of our prodrugs is actually discovered individually. So the mechanism that breaks down KP201 and does it so very rapidly in the GI doesn't seem to be the same mechanism for KP415. We're still trying to figure out exactly what that mechanism is, since we're fairly new to the KP415 data. But we assume that some of it is broken down quickly, and the rest of it actually is readily absorbed and then released slowly over time. It's a unique benefit that doesn't present itself with any other methylphenidate-based product.
This is on target right now to head to the FDA for approval in 2018. Why would you expect this to fare any better?
Well, again, our focus hasn't been on abuse deterrence with this particular product. We would love to have that sort of feature, but with a patient benefit of better onset of action, better duration, or similar duration, as well as the potential to have a robust therapy. That means it's predictable throughout the course of the day. I think those patient benefits would outweigh any risk of introducing a new stimulant. It's also a different division of the FDA that would review this. This is the psychiatry division, and while the other one was really focused on opioids and pain products.
And how about Apadaz? Is you got a complete response letter from the FDA on that? Is there hope of addressing FDA concerns and resubmitting it?
I think so. I mean, we've worked with the agency very closely after the CRL was done. We had an end of review meeting with them. We've met as much as we humanly can on this particular topic and other opioids that we have in our pipeline. And I think there's an appetite there. Again, what kind of tools do they need to have? What science do we need to show them to make them feel comfortable that we're addressing an issue that needs to be addressed? And then, what can we do with Apadaz that would make them feel better? Is it going back and doing some reformulation? Is it different packaging configurations? Or is it really just about, adding some more data overall? I really do think that Apadaz is much needed. I think that's recognized at different levels of the FDA, and that ultimately we will have a product with Apadaz.
And ultimately, is the expectation that whatever you do will require an additional study to get it past the FDA?
No, and that's the problem. Is we really don't know what it will take to get it past the FDA. The people that we've worked with so far have focused on, well, is intranasal abuse of these combination products really a problem that needs solved? As you move up in the appeal process that we've actually undertaken, you tend to get people that think a little bit higher about the real public health benefit and policy decisions, and perhaps they think differently than the division. So, I think we'll have to play the course of our current appeal to figure out, well, is it just a new label that we can resubmit quickly and get approval? Is it a new packaging configuration that we can submit quickly and get an approval? Or is it, do we need to do some additional work? And then how long would that take?
We've got a new administration coming in 2017. Do you think this changes the landscape for working with FDA in any significant way?
I do. I think the leadership that's been proposed and put in place is the right kind of leadership that's needed at the FDA. It certainly did not hurt us that there was an administrative change that really could focus then the efforts back on what can industry do to help in this space, as opposed to a more standoffish approach to what our contribution would be as far as industry goes.
What else is in the pipeline here, and what's the time frame you're looking at for what's behind these drugs?
Well, we have KP415. That one, as you said, we expect to have that in front of the FDA next year, in 2018. Sorry. And then with that, with Apadaz, we had some very good data from one of our clinical studies with just the prodrug. So we decided, well, there's no reason to have acetaminophen here in this formulation. It's really doesn't have a purpose for pain relief. So we've pursued a product known as KP21IR. It's an immediate release prodrug, and that one should also go before the FDA next year as well, in 2018.
Does acetaminophen have some kind of an abuse deterrent role to play, though, in terms of liver toxicity?
It, that I think is a misperception. We've done quite a bit of epidemiology and survey work with current abusers. Most of them really just don't care. They'll take what they take, and they're already taking high doses of opioid. That's certainly going to be more problematic than the acetaminophen that's there. It's known, and there's ways also to get around it with published YouTube videos of cold water extraction and other ways that people are clever enough to remove the acetaminophen.
And in terms of the pipeline, any other things to highlight?
We have another prodrug of an opioid. It's of hydromorphone. It's known as KP511. This is scientifically one of our most advanced products. It not only shows abuse deterrence, but also the potential for an overdose protection. The more and more we gave to animals, you didn't get any more release of the product, and so there was a huge safety benefit that we have seen, at least preclinically.
I know your stock took a real wallop with the FDA action. It was trading as high as 18. It's now trading just above $3. Do you have the cash to advance these to FDA approval, or are you going to have to raise additional funds here?
Well, that's the great thing. We've positioned the company very well. We are well financed. At the end of September, we had a little over $90 million in cash. We have these 3 great products that we can advance that are relatively low cost to develop. So our current cash gets us all the way through 2018. That's with 2 NDAs on file and perhaps an approval. And, still getting Apadaz and moving that through the appeal process, as well as advancing KP511. So we're in a great position, probably an envious position for a company that's been hit pretty hard as far as stock price, but, we're really trying to build long-term value here.
And when you look at the landscape and your technology using a prodrug as a tool of abuse deterrence, what's the opportunity going forward?
Well, I think abuse deterrence, we can expand that into other opioids. We announced last year that we have a prodrug of oxymorphone that would be similar to Opana, an extended release oxymorphone product. I think we can still benefit abuse deterrence from that perspective. But if you look historically at what prodrugs have been used for, it's been used for things to improve bioavailability, safety, toxicology, and manufacturing. All of these different things. So we're right now, really thinking on what's the next stage for our prodrug development. Really feeling that prodrugs, as we develop them for abuse deterrence, have kind of, advanced the bar pretty high. But as well, really focused on, do we look into cardiovascular, other CNS indications, metabolic diseases? Where can we advance the prodrug science to the next stage?
Travis Mickle, CEO of KemPharm. Travis, thanks so much for your time today.
Oh, thanks, Danny.
Thanks for listening. The Bio Report is a production of the Levine Media Group. To automatically download this podcast each week, subscribe to our RSS feed or through iTunes or other podcast manager. To join our mailing list, go to levinemediagroup.com. We'd love to hear from you. If you want to drop us a line or are interested in sponsoring this podcast, send an email to danny@levinemediagroup.com. Special thanks to Jonah Levine, who composed our theme music, and the Jonah Levine Collective, which performs it.